Hello YouTube, welcome back to another video. Today I'll be doing a video about something that a lot of people have been asking, and that is, why are fire alarm devices placed in such close proximity to one another in buildings? You might have seen buildings where fire alarm horns and speakers and things like that are just placed really close to each other. Maybe every 10 feet you see a speaker, then a speaker strobe, then a speaker, and you might think that's completely unnecessary. So why is that? Well, it turns out it might actually be necessary, or it might not be completely necessary to meet code, but it is something that you can do to enhance the effectiveness of the system. So when it comes to speaker quality, the more speakers you have and the lower you can tap each speaker, the more clear the message that's coming through the speakers is going to be. And this generally applies to most audio systems. So if you think about it, if you have one speaker and you place it really far from all the other speakers, you're going to have to tap that speaker really, really loud. And the louder you tap a speaker, and the farther it is from other fire alarm speakers, then that message is going to get really poor quality, especially if you're between speakers. So to remedy this issue and make the message or whatever's coming through the fire alarm system clearer, people will place fire alarm speakers really, really close to each other just to make that audio a lot higher quality. This is why you'll see, in a lot of cases, a speaker and then a speaker strobe and then a speaker and then a speaker strobe, because the strobe really doesn't matter. They just place those exactly to meet code, because all you really have to do is just place strobes at the correct candela rating when you need them, just so they're visible. But in terms of audio, it's a little different. So they'll place speakers where they need them and make the audio quality a lot better. Now, in general, this is most common with speakers, because through a fire alarm speaker system, you actually have to hear a message and then understand that to take action. Whereas with horns, a horn is either sounding or not sounding. So there's not a whole lot of information to understand from a fire alarm horn. In some cases, you might actually see a fire alarm horn placed really close to another unit. In that case, it's possible that it's a really loud environment and they just want more coverage. Or you might not be seeing some sort of barrier that isn't always there. Like, for example, in a lot of schools, you have classrooms that can't be divided by one of those portable walls. So you might see two devices really close and you're like, why are they there? There's no need for that. Well, in the event that that wall is there's technically two rooms, so you have to cover both of those rooms. Or maybe you'll see two notification appliances like within like just a few feet of one another in a hallway, and you're like, that is completely unnecessary. Well, what you might not have noticed is that there's actually a fire door that's normally held open, but when the fire alarm sounds, those doors will automatically close and then separate those two parts of the building. So now that there's a fire barrier between those two parts of the building, the notification appliance that's on one side of the fire door is not going to cover the other side of the hallway that has now been closed by the fire door. Obstructions can also be a reason why fire alarm devices are placed really close to one another. Like, for example, if you go to Lowe's, Home Depot, any big box store where you have massive shelves dividing the aisles, you're going to see a lot of fire alarm devices placed really close to one another. And obviously the reason for that is because you have such a large shelf as an obstruction, the fire alarm strobe in one aisle might not cover another aisle. For that reason, you'll see that each aisle is going to have its own row of fire alarm strobes just to cover that aisle. In a lot of cases, you see the same kind of thing with office cubicles. Sometimes you see portable offices, and they'll install a ton of fire alarm strobes over each office. And then maybe they remove those offices down the road, and now you just have 15 fire alarm strobes right next to one another. But that could be a reason. Something that might also be kind of obvious, but you might not notice, is that a new system could be in the process of being installed. Like, for example, in the thumbnail example, you can see we have a new speaker strobe and then an older unit. Generally, when you see this, it's pretty obvious that they're installing a new system. And of course, because you have to continue to keep the building protected during a new installation, the old system has to remain in place until the new system is inspected and approved. And then obviously, in some cases, fire alarms could be used for different purposes. Like, for example, sometimes you'll have a suppression horn strobe to indicate the activation of a suppression system, and then a building fire alarm horn strobe. Other cases, a fire alarm might be used as an indicator. Like, for example, in some college campuses where the buildings are all touching each other, each building will have its own alarm system, but at the passageways between buildings, you're going to see two alarms. One alarm is from the building you're in, and then the other alarm is the building you're entering. And there's sometimes going to be a sign that says, when building alarm is flashing, do not enter building 78 or something like that. And that's just to tell occupants that the alarm is sounding in that building, and to not enter that building. So here's some examples of what I'm talking about here. So you can see here in the downtown crossing subway station, we have a ton of these fire alarm speakers. We have a speaker strobe, then a speaker, and then another speaker strobe. Obviously, since this is a subway system, probably a lot of ambient noise, probably a good idea to have a ton of fire alarm speakers so that the message is going to be clear. If there is a message, of course, or someone needs to make an announcement over the speaker system. So here in my school is actually a prime example of two different ways of covering the same amount of space. So you can see in this hallway right here, we have very few fire alarm speakers. They're placed really far from one another. And this really long stretch of hallway, you only have 4 or 5 devices. And as a result, if you look at the wattage tap, each device is tapped really loud. Each of these is at least 1 watt each. And that's because since there's not very many devices, to achieve the minimum decibel rating or audio rating, you have to tap them louder. In this hallway, however, you can see each device is really close to one another, and as a result, these devices can be tapped really low. You can see each speaker is tapped only at a 1/4 watt, and that's perfectly fine because since there's so many of these speakers, the audio quality is going to be a lot better, but of course you have to deal with the added cost of more devices. So there you have it. That's why fire alarm notification devices are sometimes placed really close to one another. This could actually be an easy way to tell if a system is a speaker or horn system. If you see a ton of devices really close to one another, chances are it's a speaker system. If you couldn't already tell by the devices. But I hope you did learn something from this video. If you have any other questions about fire alarm systems in general, leave them in the comment section. I might make a video like this. But yeah, thank you for watching.